Welcome to Not Factory Approved, the site where I attempt to show you many different ongoing projects. Some are worth doing, some are not. Some are successes, and some are not. Hopefully I can share with you experience that I've gained over the years, and I'm older than I look or act, and that this experience might be valuable in helping you learn when to take on projects and when not to. I've gained a wide variety of experience over the years, as I've rarely been afraid to take on a project that others would simply say that is not worth it. Even when those have been failures, I've gained something through the process. And some of the projects you may just wonder about my sanity, but it's enjoyable. So hopefully you find this helpful. Hopefully it, if nothing else, teaches you when to quit. Otherwise, sometimes you might just see a project that comes from the ashes of despair, rises like a phoenix to be something useful once again. So hopefully you find this site helpful and enjoyable. Stay tuned. Thank you. Here we have an old drill I've had for years, made by Thor company, and not sure exactly when this was made, but the 30s wouldn't surprise me. I've had it for about 25 years. I bought it at an auction. It worked great. It's a 1/4 inch drill, low power but fairly high speed, so I like about it. So this goes together like so. I used it for quite a while, and then one day it just quit. There's little wires hanging off all over on inside. And it does need the armature turned. It's not in bad shape, but it does spark a fair amount on the brushes. The handle goes on this end, like so. So I will take it all apart, try and make sure that the armature is okay, re-grease it, clean it, put it back together, see what we get. The bearing came off from here. 2 screwdrivers. Hold it in a vise with a cloth, not to mark it, and just pry up gently. Now it looks like the cooling fan has to come out in order for a plate to release. So the bearing was here, fan mounted there with this plate. It looks like the fan comes off and then the plate slides in and out, slides in towards the shaft and then out. And I found 2 more screws inside, down on the bottom. That holds the armature in. But now I have to disconnect what is left of this brush wire. And this one has a power connect from the armature. Disconnect, probably desolder that one. I don't really want to get into taking those screws and coil springs off, or spiral springs. So now I have cleaned everything, and you can hear how good the bearings are, that they don't have any grit or any old grease in them. There's a couple there that have to be replaced. That one might not be too bad, but I will check that further. And there were more screws inside holding the brush plate and the armature in place. I'll blow this all off, get the old grease out and dirt, and then it's going to have to dry quite a bit to make sure there's no solvent in between the armature windings. I have to wash this yet, but that's the armature and fan. The bearing seems to be pretty good. See it start to polish up. Get rid of the scratches. That's how they do it in some places in the developing world. You don't have a lathe. The motor's got to be fixed. Using 400 grit paper. Dry. This is how to turn a commutator, cheap way. Fine file, fairly high speed, on 2000 RPM or so, and light touches against the motion. Afterwards, segments have to be thoroughly cleaned or they will be short. Try and keep it even, straight up and down. Vertical, and copper off. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there are little pieces of copper still inside. After blowing it out, I'll have to remove those. And I'll have to use fine emery cloth in the drill press again, or by hand. It's okay as long as you don't do it too much. I've cleaned this out. Fortunately, I can't get the chuck or the bearing out. Looks like there's a ring here. Need a special wrench for it. It's very tight. I don't have that, and I've tried using a punch to no avail. So what I'm going to try and do is I've tried blowing the grease in under low pressure. That hasn't worked, so now I'm trying. I used to pack wheel bearings without a packing tool. It's just to put the grease in and rub it, try and get some pressure built up and push it into place. Messy job, but somebody's got to do it. And if you've got grease and dirt on your hands, this will get it off. But guess where it's going? Don't really want it in there. I don't know how this armature is wound, but I'm finding there's 22 segments, which makes sense, but there's one that has no contact with any other winding. That's a bit of a concern. It's that one. As they get closer together, the resistance goes down. So it starts off straight across, lower resistance, lower resistance. Windings, the field windings, try and hold this, going to be tricky. One to the other, approximately 10 ohms, and gone to higher ranges as well. There's no conductivity to the core itself, so that's good. So the windings appear to be good. So this bearing goes on this end of the armature, and that fits down inside here. I'm going to put some grease in the bearing and pack some grease down in there, and then when I drive it in, it should squeeze it tight. A little pressure underneath.
Can I press play?
Oh, whatever. So here's the armature that's been cleaned. I put the bearing back on, put some grease into it. There's grease in the bottom of the case. The windings have been screwed back in. The wires are protruding. This will go into here, and I'll push it in and then put the bearing on the top. So now this cover goes on. Everything is in place. The bearing is greased. And that will have to be tapped on, probably. So now it spins nicely. This end, been greased. The bearing goes into here, and the gear obviously against the drive. Make sure it's in the right position. There we go. Now to put the screws in it. Now these older motors, of course, have brushes, and so these springs have to be pulled out here, which means a small hook, pull them out, and drop the brushes in. Here's the brush. That's where the spring goes. Oh yeah, good. You have to watch the angle of the brush. It goes in this way to sit properly. And you put the spring back on like that. Drops into place, holds the brush. And then for the other side as well. Anytime you turn a commutator, armature, copper down in there, you have to rebed the brushes because they bedded into where there were scratches before. It's not as important with new brushes, but you should still do it. So what I'm going to do is clamp it. You can see that there's starting to be a dark band. That's where the brushes are bedding in. It's important to do that so it doesn't arc too much when you first start it up. Another way to do it is no load for roughly 5-10 minutes. One thing that can be done with wires such as this, you have to go around a screw. You could put just a little bit of solder on the end, to stop it fraying, but do not run solder all the way up. Solder compresses with time and it will loosen. Every time somebody solders one of these and puts a screw on it, the screw works loose after about a year or so. I used to see it quite a bit working on medical equipment. Well, that is more than enough. Just the last 1/8 of an inch. It's done. All you want to do is stop the wire from fraying. I'm going to wrap this wire around the screw in the direction of travel of the screw. And there's some bent portions on the tab, and those are meant to retain the wire. So that's to go inside there, bent around the screw, and try to get it past both tabs. If you don't have enough wire, you have to cut some more. Brace the tab when you tighten it, or it will rip off the switch. Now I'm going to make sure I insulate everything before I put this cover back on. When I was trying to put it together, I found out that this wire does not reach to the switch. So I'm going to do called a Western Union splice, which is you cross them and then twist them. Wrap each one at least one turn, 2 if you can, around the wire. And there you have it. Hopefully you can see that. Then I will solder it and tape over it. I should also shorten this wire too. The neutral is a bit too long, so I will do that. Should be able to put the insulation back on it. Let's try that. Now I'll cut the tape off so we get a nice end, so it's less likely to fray and come loose. Trying to keep it as tight as possible. Then I shall undo this one and shorten it.
Didn't you say you should be working on the house?
I did.
Not the drill? Still working on the drill.
Make this a bit shorter. It's my #1 grandson telling me what my duties are. Inside the tabs. Like so. Tighten. Now it should fit. Goes here, like that. This goes here. And now to put tape over everything where it can short out. Okay.
Start.
Okay, so this goes through here. Apparently I should have done this the other way. And I still can. The was very hard to get off, so I sprayed it with silicone spray. And I can wipe that off later. And this now goes through here. It goes back on. Like that. And this one will fit in here. There you go. Now this fits in there. This was all seized up. I have to lubricate that, lubricate the plunger, the switch. Now I put the boot in. I have to clean this piece yet. So if these screws are too long for the job intended, so you need a tool like this. Well, the wire stripper, it's got pliers, various gauges of wire to strip, and then it's got a thread cutter as well. Case 832. So you thread it in. It will come through the hole on the back side. You trim it off where you want it cut, right about there. Do that. And then with the proper screwdriver, just work it back and forth, and that cleans the threads. You end up with a perfectly good end. Now that can go back in there. This is a Robertson bit, so I'll have to go get a Robertson. Okay, all together and working. Let it run for a bit, no load. Doesn't seem to be turning as fast as I remember though. But it does seem to be speeding up, so maybe it's just the brushes are bedding in. It's not sparking like it used to. The lock hole releases. Very good.